the Weekly Show with David J. Maloney. This week, David chats with iconic animator and director Gary Trousdale. And now, here's your host, David J. Maloney.
Welcome, everyone, to the Weekly Show. I'm your host, David J. Maloney. This week, we've got a truly special guest. He's one of those people whose work you and your family absolutely know, even if you never knew his name. His directing credits include no less than the iconic animated films Beauty and the Beast, Hunchback of Notre Dame, and Atlantis, The Lost Empire, all of which he co-directed with his collaborator, Kirk Wise. The man we have the privilege of interviewing tonight is none other than director Gary Trousdale. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Our featured guest tonight is an animator and director whose work on some of the most iconic 2D animation films ever made has earned him a permanent place, in my mind, in the greatest animators of all time category. His directing credits, along with collaborator Kirk Wise, include nothing less than such incredible films as Beauty and the Beast, Hunchback of Notre Dame, and Atlantis, The Lost Empire. Here to chat about his incredible career is none other than director Gary Trousdale. Gary, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
So I'm a little curious about what life was like for you before CalArts. What was it like for you growing up in California and
Before
and how
CalArts?
did, I guess, film and everything? Yes.
Oh, wow. That was so long ago. I can hardly remember. I mean, I've always liked to draw. Have drawn since I was pretty much old enough to hold crayons. And I was attracted to Disney just because they had great animation. Even at a young age, I could kind of tell the difference between, Rocky and Bullwinkle was always really funny to me, but I could always tell the animation kind of sucked. That it was hilariously written. Not that I, as a 6-year-old could understand that it was actually written, but that it was funny. But it just didn't look as good as something like Mickey, Donald, and Goofy, or Sleeping Beauty, or even the Warner Brothers ones, which I was a big fan. Bugs Bunny, Roadrunner, Porky Pig, Sylvester, the whole gang there, that was really my love of cartoons. As much as I like Disney and seeing, oh wow, they're so meticulous in their animation. It was the humor and the character in the old Warner Brothers stuff, the Foghorn Leghorn, and all of those. Also, my dad was a fan, particularly of Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote, and that was my get out of jail free card on Saturday mornings. Because instead of having to go out and rake leaves or mow the lawn or something like that, Dad would be sitting in front of the TV. I'm there with you.
So you get to spend time with Dad and get out
and the cartoons and not mow the lawn. I mean, yeah, it was the hat trick right there.
Were your parents or grandparents artistic in any way?
My mom was. My mom was craftsy. I mean, she could draw and she could paint, but she liked making things. She liked working with her hands. My grandmother was a seamstress. My dad was an athlete. I mean, he lied about his age to get into the Army, and after a stint in the artillery where he lost his hearing, the high end of his hearing, he got into special services, which in the Army is like the band or something like. So he was an athlete. He was in the Army track team, football team, basketball team. So yeah, he wasn't particularly artistic. He was very organized and very athletic, but it was my mom that had that gene, I suppose.
You chose a really interesting time to study animation, with technology and movie making changing in major ways at the time. What made you choose animation, and could you at all foresee the advent of 3D animation and the end of 2D on the horizon while you were actually studying?
Well, when I was I guess when I was in high school, I didn't really consider animation as a viable career. It didn't occur to me that you could do that and make a living. I wanted to be an architect, and so I was studying drafting and mechanical drawing and all that stuff. And then I started failing math in a spectacular fashion, and thought, okay, I got to figure out something to do. And my high school had a career day where they had different people from all walks of life come in and talk to students. And, there were firemen and pilots and nurses, all these different people. And one of them was an animation student from Cal Arts, which, wow, Cal Arts, never heard of it. So I had already figured out, and I thought I was a genius for this, like in the fourth grade, that if you take a pad of paper and draw on the different pages and flip through it, it would move. I thought, I've discovered, sliced bread. So this woman from Cal Arts had us doing stuff like that, and like drawing with Sharpie on blank film leader, and then she ran it through a projector, and there was like maybe 8 or 9 people in that little seminar. But the real takeaway was Cal Arts is an animation school just out in Valencia, which was like 45 minutes from me. So I thought, I got to check this out. Went and looked at it and applied, and you needed a portfolio, which I didn't even have a portfolio. I didn't even know what one was. And a buddy of mine in school, his mom was a painter. She did like landscape and still life and portrait and all that. And closest thing I knew to an artist. So I asked her about what's a portfolio, and she helped me put one together. Applied, was accepted. And at that time, animation it wasn't as widespread as it is now. I mean, there was certainly some animation coming out of like Spain and Italy and I believe it was Czechoslovakia at that time. And then certainly coming out of Japan and a little bit out of Korea. But, and the aforementioned Rocky and Bullwinkle was coming out of Mexico. So, it was around, but like the U.S. animation industry wasn't huge. So basically it was Disney and Warner Brothers had already kind of closed down. It was Filmation and Hanna-Barbera and a few other smaller, well, not small at that time, a few other places. And then the smaller commercial houses, because there was still a lot of hand-drawn animation being done for Exxon and Levi's and, all these different corporations. Mm-hmm. But nothing digital yet. When I finally got into Disney, I got in on the effects team on The Black Cauldron in 1983, I believe. And they were just starting to monkey around with digital. And at that time, they didn't even call it digital. I mean, they were printing out wireframe things on, wireframe structures on pieces of paper and then giving it to the assistants to like draw over it, in a clean animation cartoon line. I know this because I did some of those. There was like a particular rowboat that was moving around on the water, and the perspective was changing and the lines of the planks were changing, and those were all plotted out in real sketchy wireframe, and then given to the assistants. That was us. And then we drew over it, in the smooth line and put the wood grain in and, handed that off to the painters. So that was the extent of digital back then. And people really weren't that worried about it. I don't think it was until John Lasseter, put together, some of his little shorts, Luxo and Tin Toy and, those that people started to really like perk up and go, hey, this is something. And and that was a few years down the line still.
So now it was at Cal Arts that I guess, as fate would have it, you met your future collaborator Kirk Wise. What was your very first memory of Kirk?
Kirk was I think he was 2 years behind me, and I mean, he was one of these guys that he stood out a little bit from the rest of the group. And these groups are all. I've heard this term, for like actors as well. It was a box of puppies. Everybody wants to be the most adorable and the most on, and all of the classes are like that to one degree or another. And his class was like that as well. But Kirk kind of stood out because he was like you could tell there was like something going on inside. It wasn't just like, I want to be the craziest. It was, he had, he had a real funny streak to him, but it was a kind of a thoughtful, funny streak. And he was really quick. He was really fast. And, I've said that ever since. It's like, well, Kirk's the smart one and I'm the funny looking one. So that he's, if you want a good soundbite, talk to Kirk.
And could you in any way sense a brotherhood or kindred spirit with him in your initial conversations with him? Or did that come later?
That came later. Yeah. I mean, he was, there was a lot of people that, and we all hung out and we all had fun and we all, we were all kind of hoping, God, we're going to work together someday. And Kirk and Chris Sanders and Chris Bailey and Kelly Asbury and Kevin Lima and, just all these different people that were kind of going through at the same time and all in this big stew. Joe Ramp, Kathy Zielinski, all Dave Prexma, all these people. And it was this crazy mix of personalities and talent. And, it was really great. So picking out one at that time was a little tough. There were like Joe Ramp. I knew he was something, he was something special. There was something about Joe, but he was older than me as well. So it's that experience thing that I looked up to.
Was your first real collaborative work with Kirk working on Oliver and Company?
I think it was the first real collaborative work, because we both worked on Oliver and Company, but I think he was an animator on that, and I was in storyboard. I don't think it was until Rescuers Down Under that we both got put into story, and we're right next to each other. Our desk, cubicles were right next to each other. So, there was like a row of desks, and Kirk was there, Ed Gombert was there, Kelly was there. I mean, it was a fun little group.
Could you then kind of sense a creative spark between you guys, or did that come
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And Kirk and I were I think we were the first two that were kicked off of that project because we both had bad attitudes. So we that's where we kind of bonded and went, all right, we're in this, you and me, guy, and that's when we got put into the development department.
Now, for all of us average Joes, you and Kirk literally burst onto the scene with what is considered one of the best animated films of all time, Beauty and the Beast. How did that job find its way to you guys?
That was pure luck. No, not pure luck, but Kirk and I just hinted we've been put into the development department, and at that time, development was a lot different than development departments now, where you've got teams of people like going over submitted scripts and books and radio plays and whatever, they can like think, what can I make a film out of? Back then it was a bunch of artists. We called it daycare. It was a bunch of artists that Disney didn't want to fire, but didn't have any work for. So they put us in this building, and our boss would just like come in and go, all right, everybody, start drawing Mickey Mouse and Halloween. And that was all the direction we get. And we go, all right, there's no script, no nothing. It's like, okay, here's Goofy as Frankenstein, and here's Donald with a ghost on his, sheet on his head, and Mickey with a pumpkin. And then, a week later he'd run in and tell us something else. So it was one of those situations where we were just like drawing something, and he came in and said, all right, drop everything. We've got this project. It was a project for Epcot Center in Florida, and there was a ride that was being put into Epcot.
Was that Cranium Command?
Cranium Command, and they had this 4.5 minute pre-show that you put in the lineup area to kind of inform guests what you're going to see, what you're in for. Excuse me, and keep them from getting too restless. So that the company Disney had contracted with a studio up in the Bay Area, and they had this pencil test, already well underway, and they showed it to us, and our boss was like, like this the whole time, and we're watching it, and we're like, this kind of sucks, this isn't very good. And he said, yeah, that's exactly. So here's our job. We have to we have to like rethink and reboard this. Okay, what are the parameters? The only parameters were it was going to be called Cranium Command. There was going to be an audio animatronic character that's going to, symbolize our subconscious or our conscious, that's in this ultimately in this room, like flying your brain like you would a jet, So he's in this seat, and there's controls all around and screens for the eyes and different body parts. And the leader of this group is the military commander, General Knowledge, and that was pretty much all we had. So we said, all right, let's kick this around a little bit, and we had like a week to turn it around, and because at that time, Michael Eisner, Jeffrey Katzenberg, Frank Wells, they had said, no, cut this one off. Why don't we give this to our own guys? Why are we farming this out? And it was, in their defense, in this other group's defense, it was being spearheaded by Metropolitan Life. That was the sponsor of the pavilion. And Metropolitan Life isn't really known for its funny cartoons or, entertaining storytelling. So, they were doing the best they could with what they had. But our bosses said, no, give it to our guys. We can do better than this. So in a week, after watching, a bunch of movies about drill sergeants and, that kind of thing, we came in, we reboarded it, pitched it, boom, sold. All right, go. So Rob Minkoff was put in charge of that. And Kirk and I looked at the reel for the main show, which was like a 12-minute show, and we said, you got bigger problems than just the 4.5-minute pre-show. This is also kind of bad. And so Jerry Reese picked Kirk and myself to go to Florida and reboard and redesign and rewrite the main show while he directed the live action. So we spent several months down in Florida doing that. In the meantime, one of the Roger Rabbit shorts had a problem, and Rob Minkoff was pulled off of Cranium Command and put onto Roger Rabbit. Cranium Command suddenly had no director. The pre-show had no director. Kirk and I were the only ones who knew anything about it, and so they threw us onto it. So that was our directing debut. It was a 90-day project that we got up and got running and got through, and it was reasonably successful. I mean, people liked it. And afterwards, we were like, whew, boy, that was exhausting. I was glad that's over with. And like 2-3 weeks later, we got called into our boss's office again and said, can you be on a plane on Wednesday? This was a Monday morning. Can you be on a plane on Wednesday to New York? You might get to direct Beauty and the Beast. And we were like, what? So the backstory in that was Beauty and the Beast was being produced in London and had been there for almost a year with Don Hahn and a British directing team. And their story reel came into the Disney High Command, and it was not particularly great. I mean, it was really pretty, and it was beautiful to look at. But we said it's kind of like watching an animated masterpiece theater. It's just, if you've seen the was it 1942, something like that, the Jean Cocteau Beauty and the Beast, where it's very stately, and the magic that happens is just kind of this flowy, amorphous power, and there's really no character to it. So that's kind of what this London animated version was like.
Was that director Richard Purdam's version?
Yes, it was.
Now,
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, is it true the reason Disney didn't like the first storyboards from the previous director Purdam was because they were too dark?
They weren't necessarily dark. They were just kind of dull. They didn't. This is also coming on the heels of The Little Mermaid. With Howard and Alan like really doing the Broadway number on Little Mermaid, and then you go to this, and it was just like this stately, slog. It just wasn't that engaging. And Jeffrey Katzenberg said, let's get Howard and Alan to do that Little Mermaid magic to it. And I don't think the Purdams were crazy about that idea. And whether they left of their own accord or were encouraged to leave, I'm not sure. And I suppose it depends on who you ask. But suddenly that was, without a without a directing team. So they asked Rob Minkoff again, and he said, "Sure, I'll do it, but you have to give me complete creative control," which I'm sure Disney had a good laugh at that concept. Then they offered it to another guy who said he was interested in getting to live action and, wasn't interested in doing animation. So Kirk and I were still kind of like floating around. We were drawing Goofy as Tarzan of the Apes. We were doing Goofy of the Apes at that point, and we hadn't screwed up Cranium Command. And they said, "Okay, let's get those guys and bring them in." They weren't entirely confident in our ability, so they made us acting directors. We were like not real directors. So Kirk's joke was, "Oh, I suppose we better start acting like directors."
So getting that job after, the prior director had it, did it feel like you were taking over this massive directorial project that was sure to succeed, or did it feel like you might be hopping onto a sinking ship, or was it just like, this is a job, we're just going to come and do what they want us to do and do it the best we can? What was the mindset?
A little of the latter. A little of, okay, here it is. That they threw out everything except the title. There was still Belle, there was still a Beast, but I think, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think there was no Gaston. There was a suitor, and there may have been several suitors, like in the old live action versions, but all of that got thrown out. I think there were several suitors, and Howard just mashed them all into one. That was Howard's doing, and created Gaston. And then he gave him LeFou as the punching bag sidekick.
That's our show for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. A special thanks to director Gary Trousdale for joining us. He's going to be back again next week for part 2 of our interview. Stay safe, everyone.